Friends, it is my joy and privilege to introduce to you someone, for many of us, needs no introduction. Dr. Wayne Brouwer served Harderwyk Ministries for many, many years and led this church well, and we are grateful for that. And a little personal note, this is a joy and a privilege to introduce Dr. Brouwer because when I was in seminary, I'm trying to remember how almost 20 years ago, Dr. Brouwer was a professor for my Creeds and Confessions class, my Credo class, and Church Polity class. A little background on that. When you're a freshman, your first year in seminary, you go to an abbey, to a convent, and it's a cool trip, you know. Your second year, you go on a cultural immersion trip to some other place in the world, and then your senior year, for that J term, you have like 2 weeks of intensive classes, okay, and studying polity and creeds. And I just want to say that Dr. Brouwer made the Creeds and Confessions compelling, interesting, and wonderful. And I think that is a credit to him as a professor. And it is my joy and privilege to welcome Dr. Brouwer to share God's word this morning. Let's praise God.
Oh, wow. We are members here, you know. This is our church. So I'm busy preaching and teaching in other churches most Sundays, so that's why we don't often show up for worship. You haven't changed a bit. He wrote at that time the best credo that I had ever read, and he continues to be a stellar communicator of the things of Jesus. So, yeah. Well, you all look the same. I look the same. As for beauty, I'm not a great star. There are others more handsome by far, but my face, I don't mind it because I'm behind it. It's those out in front that I jar. Poetry, it helps us to say things quickly in a number of different ways. My dad used to send us off to early bedtime by saying early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. Didn't realize until later he forgot the last half of the poem. But what does it matter how much he wins if he's always asleep when the fun begins? Poetry. You're going on a journey with the poems of the Bible, the songs of the Bible. Poetry is something that speaks to us, allows us to say things together, make beautiful music together because we're on target with one another by the music and the poetry. And what a great hymn, what great hymns we've already sung and more still to come. Poetry is the language of the Israelites. Half of the Old Testament is written in poetic form. We don't necessarily understand the poetry of the Israelites in the same way that we sometimes like the poetry of Taylor Swift. One of my daughters took her 2 daughters to a Taylor Swift concert, and they've been singing Taylor Swift ever since. There are songs that stick with us that last for a lifetime. And the Psalms are the songbook of the people of God. The poetry of the Israelites was not the same as what we generally think of as poetry, but it is deeply meaningful and deeply moving. And one of the most profound poets, besides David, who wrote about half of the Psalms, is a guy named Asaph. We don't know that much about Asaph, but if David, one of the greatest singer-songwriters of all time, thought that Asaph was good, he was good. He was real good. And Asaph wrote about a dozen of the Psalms. Could be more, but 12 of them are attributed to him, and most of them line up together. There's Psalm 50, and it speaks about the kind of comprehensive faith of God's people. And then there are 10 in a row, 73 through 83. And we're going to look at one of Asaph's Psalms this morning, Psalm 77. Listen to these words. I cried out to God for help. I cried out to God to hear me. When I was in distress, I sought the Lord, and at night I stretched out untiring hands and would not be comforted. I remembered you, God, and I groaned. I meditated, and my spirit grew faint. You kept my eyes from closing. I was too troubled to speak. I thought about the former days, the years of long ago. I remembered my songs in the night. My heart meditated, and my spirit asked, will the Lord reject forever? Will he never show his favor again? Has his unfailing love vanished forever? Has his promise failed for all time? Has God forgotten to be merciful? Has he in anger withheld his compassion? And I thought, to this I will appeal. The years when the Most High stretched out his right hand, I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your miracles of long ago. I will consider all your works and meditate on your mighty deeds. Your ways, God, are holy. What God is as great as our God? You are the God who performs miracles. You display your power among the peoples. With your mighty arm, you redeemed your people, the descendants of Jacob and Joseph. The waters saw you, God. The waters saw you and writhed. The very depths were convulsed. The clouds poured down water. The heaven resounded with thunder. Your arrows flashed back and forth. Your thunder was heard in the whirlwind. Your lightning lit up the world. The earth trembled and quaked. Your path led through the sea. Your way through the mighty waters, though your footprints were not seen. You led your people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron. What I wouldn't give to hear Asaph or Asaph's choir sing that song. Asaph made the transition between the end of David's reign and into Solomon's reign, and he was the chief choir director and music director at the temple during those years. What a time, what a time. But you see what Asaph is doing. He gets at our heart, he gets at our gut. Because we all walk through the waters, and we wonder about the storms, and we fear the darkness, and we don't know the way to go. And sometimes God is very, very silent. I think of the song that Mosey Lister wrote back in 1955. Once I stood in the night with my head bowed low, in the darkness as black as could be, and my heart cried aloud, and I said, "Oh God, don't hide your face from me. Like a king, I may live in a palace so tall with great riches to call my own, but I don't know a thing in this whole wide world that's worse than being alone. Hold my hand all the way, every hour of every day, from here to the great unknown. Take my hand, let me stand where no one stands alone." Frederick Buechner knew that to be the case. Great writer, speaker, Presbyterian pastor. He had a dream. I suppose I dream. I suppose you dream. Some of you know your dreams. Some of them are a lot of little nightmares. But we dream. Not many of us can remember our dreams the way that Frederick Buechner remembered this dream. He dreamed that he was traveling, and in his dream he had to stay overnight someplace far from home. There was a hotel. He went to the front desk. He got a key for a room. He went through many hallways and got to the room, put his key in the door in the days when there were keys to put in locks and doors. And he opened the door, and he found himself in a room that felt exactly right. The temperature was right. The lighting was just wonderful. The furniture fit his body. The bed was the right firmness. It was a great place to stay, even though he was not at home. And in the morning, in his dream, still in the same dream, he left the place and went traveling again. And you know that you can do a lot in a single dream. And in that dream, he had to travel on and couldn't get home. And that night came back to the same hotel. Once again, stopped at the front desk, got a key, walked many hallways, and finally got to the room, put his key in the lock, turned the lock, opened the door, and immediately knew he was not in the same room. In fact, he was not in the right room. The lighting was harsh. The chairs didn't fit his body. The music was grating. Everything was wrong about this room, and he felt on edge because of it. He couldn't stay in this room, so in his dream, he went back down to the front desk with his key. He asked the clerk if he could stay in the room he had stayed in before, the one that fit him just right. And the clerk said, "Well, tell me which room that was." And he said, "I don't remember which room that was." "Well, tell me a little bit about the room." "Well, it was a room where everything seemed right, made just for me." And he began to describe what the former room was like. "Oh," said the clerk, "I know which room you're talking about. And you can have that room anytime you come here. You just have to ask for it by name." "Ask for it by name? What are you talking about?" "It's the room called Remember. It's the room called Remember. The room where we remember who we are, whose we are, what we're about." I like that. We're coming to a room called Remember today, a room that Jesus filled with his disciples that last night before his execution. We're coming to a room today that has meaning and purpose, and somehow it feels right for us. It fits. But sometimes as we wander in between rooms, things don't fit as well as they should. A couple of you maybe remember that time around 30 plus years ago when I was early on in my pastoral ministry here. Wow, that's a long time ago. Remember Jan Bosch, Dr. Jan Bosch? And remember how sometimes on a Sunday evening, we would do things a little bit differently. And Dr. Bosch said, "Let me take the service." I like Dr. Bosch. I never had the ability to have him as my doctor. He had retired by that time. First time I can really remember Dr. Bosch is sitting in what used to be my office, which has been changed and taken away now. But we sat at that table together and we talked, and he was such a gracious and delightful and firm person. And he had with him a couple of catalogs. And the catalogs were of all kinds of things that churches should buy in order to make their buildings and their people look the way that churches should look. And he opened two of those catalogs to the pages that showed robes for pastors. And he said, "Oh, Pastor Brouwer." And he had this wonderful Dutch brogue. "Pastor Brouwer," he said, "I love your preaching." He said, "I was thinking to myself sitting there on Sunday morning, you know what would be good right now? If Pastor Brouwer would wear a robe." Now, I'm a dumb farm kid from Minnesota, and I do not do robes, okay? And churches have tried, and they have failed. And I don't think at this point that's going to change much in my life. But Dr. Bosch said, "Now I've been talking to some of the women in our congregation, some of the women who have really good style. And I said to them, you help Pastor Brouwer find the right robe to wear, and I will buy it for him." That transaction has never been made. But Dr. Bosch, I'll never forget that evening, Sunday evening, when he stood right about here, microphone in front of him, Fred at the organ. No, it was Catha then. And he said, and he told us stories about several hymns. And he told us about what happened to him when he was just a young medical intern in the Netherlands during the days of the Second World War. They had managed to smuggle in the parts for a crystal radio set. And they hid those parts around the operating room so that they couldn't be found when the Germans made their frequent and varied visits. And on Sunday evenings, after all of the rest of the busy work was done, usually in the medical field, after all the surgeries had happened and the patients that were there were in their rooms and in their beds, those who were able from among the medical staff would gather secretly. One by one, they would come into that operating room, and they would find these bits and pieces of the crystal radio set, and they would put them together. And then they had a small speaker, and they put it on the operating table. And the little group of them huddled round the operating table. And they heard, if they tuned it correctly, they heard the choir of St. Martin's in the Field in London on the BBC shortwave broadcast. And every time at 5 p.m. their time, that service that was aired on the BBC would begin with the choir of St. Martin's in the Fields, singing the song, the hymn of Henry Light, "Abide with me, fast falls the eventide, the darkness deepens, Lord, with me abide. Change and decay in all around I see. O thou who changest not, abide with me." They could hear the shelling. Their lives were daily in danger. And Dr. Bosch stood right there. And you know what we did? We sang, "Abide with me." All 5 stanzas. We went to the room called Remember. Yeah, it was his room called Remember, but it became our room called Remember, because in that moment, we knew who we were and whose we were. And that's what Asaph does. Can you imagine the chief choir director, the worship leader, the pastor of Fusion, the organist for Celebration, having doubts or difficulties or troubles? We might. They don't. They're above all of that. Here's Asaph, one of the key leaders in the worship of Solomon's temple. He says, I don't know what's taking place. Now, maybe you have a keen sense of how our world is functioning. I don't. Maybe you have a keen awareness of how all of the pieces fit together. I don't. Maybe your life floats along as if there are no bumps in the roads, no potholes. It's not my experience. And that's when Asaph calls us to go back to that room called Remember. What was it again that God did in those times when God seemed so present? What was it that happened when God led his people through the seas and the water stood on walls on either side and didn't crash on top of us? We didn't see his footprints, says Asaph, but we knew it was God doing this. We got to the other side. We don't know how. It wasn't us. Yes, Moses and Aaron were there, but man, this wasn't our doing. It wasn't our making. We needed to go to the room called Remember, says Asaph, to recall those things and remember who we were and whose we were. It was 1932. I know a few of you were around at that time. I was not. Thomas A. Dorsey had been a musician all his life, grown up in a churched environment, got really into the music of his day and kind of left his faith for a while, and then was brought back begrudgingly to his faith, began to write songs and direct bands, and was a great musician. And then he met Nettie, the love of his life, and they were wed. He continued to earn money for their living circumstances by participating in big events where there were musicians coming together. There was an event down in St. Louis. They were living in Chicago at the time. She was pregnant, only about 8 months. So they figured he could go down to St. Louis and participate in this event. He'd be back in time to be there with her at the birth of their child. It was a several-day event. There was a large platform in a large auditorium and choirs and bands and musicians. It was the last night of performance and speakers, and he was leading the music. And as he sat down in his chair on the platform, someone came up to the platform, surreptitiously handed him a note. His head went down. He left the platform. The note said to him that his wife had gone into early labor and that she died giving birth to their son. Their son was still alive, but weak. He got in a car with a friend. They drove straight through from St. Louis to Chicago. He got to the hospital in time to hold his newborn son in his hands. And then his baby died. And when the funeral took place, his wife was in the casket, and the body of his baby son was laid on her chest. His faith was shaken. God was absent. The world was a very dark place, and there was no real way to know where he might go. Friends had a cottage along Lake Michigan. I gave him the keys, stocked it with groceries, told him to go there, take what time he needed. And at first he just sat, angry, deep grief. But there was a piano in the cottage, and he was a musician. And eventually he found his way. His fingers kind of drew him to the keyboard. And he sat there, and it came. This is what he told later on. It just came. It just came. Precious Lord, take my hand. Lead me on, help me stand. I am tired. I am weak. I am worn. Through the storm, through the night, lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord. Lead me home. When the day grows drear, precious Lord, linger near. When the night is past and gone, hear my cry, hear my call. Hold my hand lest I fall. Take my hand, precious Lord. Lead me home. We need a room called Remember, to find ourselves and be found once again. And as we come to the communion table this morning, Asaph is here, and David is here. Dr. Bosch is here. The ones we've known and loved are here. The ones we haven't known, but by the grace of Jesus are known by him, are here. And we're here because this fits, and it reminds us of who we are. Let's pray using the words of Thomas A. Dorsey. Precious Lord, take my hand. We'll stand as we sing the three stanzas. That's our prayer.